disruptive.
America that I fought for.
Weird thing to happen. Hello, one and all. Welcome to this edition of Kitz Corner. It's been a fantastic day so far. So thanks to National Citizens Inquiry and investigators, independent journalists, we're finally getting transparency over the tyranny and the oppression of the Trudeau regime attacking citizens during the Freedom Convoy event, and how peaceful protesters that were protesting against the mandates, protesting against really the attack of science, not attacking science themselves, but really attacking the government's stance on attacking fundamental science when it came to this virus, saying that, you know, the lockdowns, which were proven ineffective to begin with, were just more political tyranny and oppression and authoritarian ruling than it was about protecting people. And in fact, more damaged people. It damaged people internally, it damaged people mentally and physically. That has not been fully acknowledged yet by the parliamentary system. Has not been disclosed, not been apologized by any means of the government here in Canada. And there's a new factoid to this that is pretty daunting, just showing how much the Trudeau government and Justin Trudeau himself personally put a vendetta on Canadian citizens because of their unaccepted views when it came to the vaccines and COVID and this mandatory experimental injection they were getting to their bodies. I thought the whole, my body, my choice was supposed to extend into also getting experimental drugs put inside you. But apparently that was not the case when you're bought by big pharmaceuticals and the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum. But here's this. So the Toronto Star tweets out, the Trudeau government spent millions of dollars on private lawyers for work related to the Emergencies Act. So they spent millions of taxpayer dollars to pay for lawyers to cover up his actions of using the Emergencies Act to tyrannize peaceful protesters. As your, trusted, loyal government, ladies and gentlemen, that your tax dollars, millions of it, went to cover up the actions of basically a wannabe dictator. Because when he invoked the Emergencies Act, there was no scientific backing of this. There was no provisions. There was nothing towards medical science. It was just complete atrocity against his own citizens here in Canada. And considering the fact that people have suffered through the pandemic, they lost businesses, they lost their livelihoods, they lost their homes. There was a homelessness outbreak. Kids were mentally absolutely screwed. Like I said, the pandemic, the lockdowns, this roller coaster that we went through for years screwed up so many people mentally and physically that it is unapologetically disturbing. So that's where this comes in. And this is from the Toronto 99, which I didn't even know this publication existed till now. They're an independent site. And it says, Trudeau spent close to $4 million on lawyers to impose Emergencies Act, grant himself dictator-like powers. So for those who aren't aware of that situation, it's when the Prime Minister, and this has never been done, never hardly been done, except for one instance, has ever been invoked to use governmental authoritarian powers to dictate over citizens. And he used this during the Freedom Convoy, where people gathered together of all walks of life, all religions, all creeds, all, races, religions, so on and so forth, gathered together to respect each other and tolerate each other and fight against the mandates that were ripping this nation apart. And he invoked these powers because we had unacceptable thoughts here in Canada. I thought we were supposed to be a diverse nation. That was my understanding. That was one of the things I enjoyed being a Canadian and proud to be Canadian was we're supposed to be a diverse nation of opinions and thoughts and credences and cultures. We're a multicultural nation. But apparently that's not the case. So this article goes on by saying the Trudeau government has no problem dipping its hand into taxpayer funds, especially when it comes to granting itself authoritarian powers. After pressure from the Conservative MP Dane Lloyd, the Liberal government provided details on dollar amount it spent on lawyers when opposed to the Emergencies Act. The government spent over $3.7 million to hire private lawyers for work related to the Emergencies Act. However, it refused to get into detail about how the funds were spent. I love the transparency. We know how much they spent, but we don't know exactly the certain amount. Trudeau used the Emergencies Act to disperse the most peaceful protest, the Freedom Convoy, that gripped the area around Parliament in Ottawa. Protesters sang songs, shared food with each other, and generated international media attention with their event. Oh my God, they're so dangerous. They're so right-wing. They're so fascist and Nazi-like. Oh my God, full of white supremacists sharing food with each other and sang songs and danced around in bouncy castle. Oh my God, it's... Yeah. Remember how hyped they made this? They made it sound like it was an attack. They made it sound like worse than January 6th. And when you saw on foot the real video of the protest, it looked like a street carnival. It looked like something you would see in Toronto on a weekend this summer. It seemed like just a wholesome event. And we saw the humanity of people. We saw people that were gathering around and singing songs and dancing and loving and having that human spirit inside of them. That was the greatest thing to imagine. And that's why I got so much media attention. They were trying to cover it up because, as you know, when a protest breaks out and they see this much of people gathering together, it spreads. And this is the virus that they were trying to silence out from people. This is the virus they were trying to protect us from, of information and solidarity towards one another. Because if we become united, if we have transparency and people come united on common goods, we can rise against the tyranny of the government. But they don't want that. They don't want us. They want us to be complicit. They want us to go with the status quo, continue on their criminality, and just we follow through like sheep. In response, the Prime Minister and other far left politicians linked the protesters to terrorists and seditionists. This goes to show you how far we've gone. How far we've gone into the dystopian nightmare that we're in right now. Because I always thought, and I consider myself to be, an original lefty, when, Woodstock was around, or Occupy Wall Street. Remember those things? That you would see left-wing people rallying against the oppression and tyranny of corporations and billionaires and governmental powers and the authoritarian reach that measured into it. I thought that was supposed to be our thing. But now, those same lefty politicians, those same lefty people are now attacking people doing the exact same thing and linking them to far-right extreme terror groups. Because the left wing has been bought and destroyed and dismantled by the corporate establishment, by governmental overreach, and has become a faction of neoliberalism and a faction of fascism. To date, no charges of conspiracy have been filed against any of the protesters involved in the convoy. Most of the charges were mischief and relatively minor offense in Canada. That $4 million. They spent $4 million to further attack you. That just seems nefarious. And, you still want to think that this guy, Justin Trudeau, the Liberal Party, the establishment here in Canada, is on your side. Well, we're so different than the States. No, we're not. Clearly, we're not. Because the United States would do this day in, day out. But here, you know, we're doing it as we're demonizing the States for doing this, because we're pretty much bought by the same global conglomerates that have bought every single governmental body around the world. That's just, it's insulting and devastating, and this is why we had the Freedom Convoy. This is why people spoke out. This is why people went and gathered, and it took a bunch of truckers to rally this nation together to say enough is enough. This tyranny needs to stop. There's no backing. There's just more divide. There's more divisiveness. There's more hatred towards each other. This is not helping the cause. And it was based on lies. It was based on fear-mongering. It was based on disinformation. They provided no transparency to any of the measures. There was no scientific evidence or inquiry on why we need these lockdowns and mandates to begin with. No scientific inquiry. In fact, if you asked for scientific inquiry, you were deemed a stupid, idiot, terrorist, conspiracy nut that you're willing to kill people for. That's what they linked you to, for asking questions, for being concerned. So when Justin Trudeau was actually on trial, this is him in Hamilton, and when he was on trial for invoking the Emergency Powers Act, this is what he said in front of the courthouse when a reporter asked him, do you think you went a bit too far, and do you think there's severe consequences for your actions on tyrannizing against your own people? Here's what he had to say.
Prime Minister, first of all, this inquiry that starts today, 65 witnesses over 30 days, when it's all wrapped up, and the Commissioner, if he finds that there was no justification for the federal government to invoke the Emergencies Act, should there be consequences for the federal government, including your resignation?
Well, we knew from the very beginning that invoking the Emergencies Act is a big step. It had never been done before, but given these unprecedented...
So he completely ignored the question. Completely ignored the question. He asked if there's severe consequences for your actions. And he just went on to say, well, it's the first time we've ever done this, so... No, that's not what he's asking. He knows this is the first time you ever done this. That's why it's a rare thing. That's why it's never heard of. That's why no politician should ever be doing this, because it should only be in extreme cases, very, 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 very extreme cases, that an Emergency Powers Act should be invoked in any instance. But yet you did it because truckers, who were the most vaccinated occupation in Canada, and they didn't tell you this during all the media coverage of the protests. They told you that there were a bunch of right-wing, bootlicking, country nuts. They didn't tell you that the truckers who started this thing, who ignited this rally, were the most vaccinated occupation here in Canada. And they were sick of the mandates. They were sick of the tyranny. They were sick of the surveillance of crossing the border. The one guy who was on Fox News said it was ridiculous that they're tracking us with their cell phones to know when we're crossing the border before we even reach the border. Just how creepy and disturbing that is. And this is just complete overreach and violation of individual human rights of citizens. That's why this is such a severe thing. This is a severe consequence, and the reporter's asking, should there be consequences? Absolutely there should be. But he just skipped over and said, well, it's the first time we've ever done this. First time we ever done this. So, yeah. It's a very rare thing. Let's watch this again.
Prime Minister, first of all, this inquiry that starts today, 65 witnesses over 30 days, when it's all wrapped up, and the Commissioner, if he finds that there was no justification for the federal government to invoke the Emergencies Act. Should there be consequences for the federal government, including your resignation?
But we knew from the very beginning that invoking the Emergencies Act is a big step. It had never been done before, but given these unprecedented illegal protests, we needed to take action. We took it in a way that was measured, that was responsible, that was time limited, and we knew full well that there needed to be a...
We took action that was responsible and time limited. We were the faithful ones, okay? We were the faithful ones. The people that were coming in and blocking streets peacefully, exercising their fundamental rights, the freedom of assembly and freedom of protest, they are the violators. As opposed to us that got the cops to crack people's heads open, that violated people, that beat up people. Over COVID, they were so worried about catching COVID that they were cracking the skulls of Canadian citizens, putting them in the hospital. How messed up that is. How messed up that is. That you're putting more people in the ER because you're beating the heads of people, protecting yourselves from a virus. It's just so insane. So insidiously insane.
Public inquiry. Canadians need that level of transparency and accountability, and that's why we launched this inquiry. That's why I'm so happy to be...
So how come he just said that Canadians deserve inquiry and the level of transparency? Why did we not get any of that when it came to COVID? Why were we silenced and suppressed and demonized for having inquiry when it came to the virus, when it came to this pandemic, when it came to figuring out what exactly is causing this pandemic? You know, if you questioned anything, even listening to other doctors, you were vilified, you were demonized, you were thrown under the bus, you were screamed at, yelled at, you were told that you shouldn't be allowed in an acceptable society, you're not allowed to go out, you're not allowed to see friends, you're not allowed to... It separated people. It got to the point we were segregating people away, and it broke up families, it broke up relationships, it did permanent damage. Not just, you know, with restaurants shutting down, not just with shops, but physical harm to humanity here in Canada and the United States and all around the world that partaked in this. That there's no excuse. There is no excuse. There is no way he could sworm his way out of this. And the fact that we're in 2023 now, and they're still trying to push this, after everything that we know about the evil, insidious, creepy, disturbing, tyrannical oppression that they've done on a massive global scale, and they're still trying to push this around. Like, it's just, oh my God.
That I offered from the beginning to be part of appearing at this commission, and we're going to make sure that Canadians see the situation we were facing and how the tools we used were appropriate.
Sure, but if it's found that there was no justification for it, again, what should the consequences be for that?
I think...
So the reporter repeats the question because he didn't answer the question. He said, should there be severe consequences if they found the federal government guilty of not having justification for invoking this? What are the consequences? Should you resign? That's what he's asking, and he's still not answering the question, refusing to answer the question, and giving stupid talking points, ridiculous talking points, hypocritical talking points. Because there was no transparency, there was no level of inquiry when it came to this. There was no level of inquiry on why the Prime Minister did what he did, why he, didn't talk to the protesters directly, instead, managed to get himself COVID and hide himself away in his cabin, away from peaceful Canadians that just wanted decency and respect. And they wanted transparency. They wanted to know what the hell is going on with this. So the reporter repeats the question again, and again, he's going to refuse.
The important thing is for Canadians to understand the situation we were in and the choices we make. We didn't enter into using the Emergencies Act lightly. We used it with a sense of it was the necessary tool at the time. We used it in a way that was measured and proportionate, and we're really pleased that the Commission is going to be able to hear from all these witnesses, and that was why I offered to appear.
There is nothing light and acceptable about what he did to people. Nothing. It is inexcusable, the actions that he committed against Canadian citizens. He's saying that this is a responsible act at the time. Like, this is something we had to do at the heat of the moment. The fact that they're still trying to demonize this in 2023. The fact that we have had inquiry after inquiry, and like I said, there's been countless independent investigators and journalists and reporters that have been out there trying to dig into the story, and they've been silenced out, they've been smeared, they've been demonized, they've been vilified, they've been, cut out of the cultural speak. Like, it's just the outrage people should be having on this. Like, this should be maximum overdrive to the point that every single Canadian should be, at this point, walking out against the federal government. Because they demonize people. Ordinary citizens. Including people that probably voted for Justin Trudeau. Because they didn't realize that he was going to go down this dark, deep rabbit hole of neoliberal fascism, where the corporate estate and the government collide themselves together to do extensive overreach and violations of human rights, oppressing their own citizens. It is downright disturbing. Just not even with the protesters, but even afterwards, when they froze their bank accounts. They froze their assets for anyone that contributed to the protesting. The counter-protests against the medical tyranny of COVID. And now that's led into this the central banking system. That's led to digital IDs. That has led now to this this currency that's going to be occupied and controlled by the federal government to decide whether you have finances or not. The amount of outrage people should be having should be, like, high level. Because I'm outraged. People watching this should be outraged. And there's people out there that are probably going to demonize this. They're probably going to attack me and saying that I'm a Looney Tune, tinfoil hat nutcase, preaching Alex Jones-like quality on how this is all illegal. It is illegal. What he did. And there's not enough counteraction and not enough consequence on a prick like Justin Trudeau for what he did. There is no counteraction to this. None of the outlets here in Canada, CBC, CTV, Global, none of them have counteract enough to what he did. And just to remind people of what he did, here's a little montage here, and this is deeply disturbing, of just how the response was to people that came to Ottawa. And like I said, they were singing songs, or they're feeding people. It looked like a regular street carnival. And this is what they did to peaceful protesters exercising their right, their fundamental rights of freedom of assembly and freedom of speech. They're playing the national anthem is just more devastating.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land.
Okay, on out of the car.
True patriot love in all of our skies.
And we're supposed to be the peacekeepers. We're We're supposed to be the peacekeepers here. Like, I bet you people in the United States and around the world that are watching this in Canada are shocked at this is how Canadians treat other Canadians. That these cops are beating up people, cracking their heads. Like, look at this. This looks like they're breaking into someone's RV. This is inexcusable. That is heartbreaking. That is heartbreaking. That is what our country was and continues to be. And I'm speechless about. I'm worried about how far this is going to go. They did this just with, the mandate protest, and now they're continuing on this trek of total tyranny when it comes to, central banking, when it comes to more censorship, when it comes to attacking individual rights and freedoms, when they, try to do this, woke tolerance, but it's not really tolerating people. It's actually more segregating people away from society. It's just demonizing our population. And how there's not more of an anger, even now, is just, I don't know what else to say. I really don't know what else to say. And someone tweeted this out under the video. They replied to, this is a snapshot of the Charters and Rights and Freedoms of Canada, which is interesting that they replied with this because, people should know that all the illegal protesting that Justin Trudeau said, how they're, causing a ruckus and disturbance in Ottawa and how dare they, have unacceptable views. Well, under this nation and our charters and rights and freedoms that every single Canadian is allowed to have and have fought and died for, just consider this. Everyone has the following fundamental freedoms of conscience and religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication, and freedom of peaceful assembly. And notice how all these have been violated by the Trudeau regime. Every single one of these has been violated repeatedly by the current administration, by the current governance here in Canada. Every single one of these. Whether it's Bill C-11, C-18, dominating over, people's right to express themselves on social media and how censorship is taking over, how we continue to suppress people's exercising their religion in a peaceful manner, and peaceful assembly. Look at the Emergencies Act. Look at how we're demonizing people that are causing a ruckus, which is the whole point of protesting. If people are so angry and so against the people that were causing a ruckus, they really need to look at the definition of a protest. Because the whole point is to cause a ruckus. It's supposed to be a disturbance. It's supposed to cause media stirs and attentions. That is how a protest is supposed to work. You don't protest alone inside your house. That's not a protest. That's just you having a different thought. You're not going to stir anything up by handwriting a letter. But that just sums it up, that every single one of these have been violated by the Trudeau administration, by the Trudeau regime, and still continuing to violate. And there's no consequence. There's no counteraction. Nobody has stepped up really against this. Even Pierre Poilievre, who, yes, he does have the right jabs when it comes to Trudeau in the House of Commons when question period's on, but he has not really stepped up to the plate to fundamentally be on the side of Canadians. And considering the fact that he is a kind of mainline conservative, he's a mainline corporate establishment puppet. I'm sure he's connected with other organizations. I don't know if he's connected to the World Economic Forum, but there's possibility that he probably is. He has not stepped up to the plate. So I'm pretty sure whether it's, Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre or Jagmeet Singh or whoever it is, because our government, because the establishment is so corrupted by this dark evil empire of globalists, of international bankers, of hedge funds and sinister people, that no matter who it is, like even look at Doug Ford here in Ontario, did the exact same thing. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle these politicians on. They are on the side of evil because it's really us versus them. They're on the side of tyranny of the corporate estate. They're on the side of global elitists against the peasants, against us, against the populist. And the fact that they're violating first-hand fundamental rights of ordinary citizens should be appalling to more people. And there should be more reaction and more anger towards how this administration, how this parliamentary destroyed the lives of people. And I don't know what more there is going to take to convince people. I really don't know what more it's going to take here in 2023. And they're still trying to push more COVID jabs, by the way. Which I can just tell you that they're safe and effective. My heart just swells over the pride and the givens of these experimental vaccinations that have not been provenly tested. But that's just my opinion. You can take it or leave it. But there you go. Just how sinister this is.